Hi guys, my name is Sutapa and today we're doing the fifth chapter of our book World Politics and the name of the chapter is Contemporary South Asia. तो ये जो हमारा बुक है वर्ल्ड पॉलिटिक्स का, इसमें हमने इससे पहले क्या क्या पढ़ा। हमने देखा कि कोल्ड वॉर के टाइम पे कौन से दो सुपर पावर कंट्रीज थे जो वर्ल्ड पॉलिटिक्स को डोमिनेट कर रहे थे, राइट। सो द विनर्स ऑफ द Second World War, the two allies of the Allied powers, which were US and USSR, came up as the two superpowers, and they were basically the ones that dominated world politics by their influence in their own respective regions. So after that, we studied about the decline of the USSR, the disintegration of the USSR, and the decline of its power, and whereby US came up as the only superpower in the international arena, which is why back then the world was called a unipolar world, because US was the pole in that case. Then we looked at alternative centers of power, जहाँ पे हमने चाइना के बारे में पढ़ा, how China is growing and emerging as the world's largest economy. How then we looked at the European Union and the Southeast Asian region, right, and how all of these had the ability or the potential to to restrict the powers of the US, which has come up to be the sole superpower in the world. So we looked at all these areas. So we've studied about USSR and US in the first chapter. Then we looked at the European Union. We looked at China, which is present in Asia, and which is a very influential country in Asia. Then we looked at the Southeast Asian region, where there are small countries, but their economic powers, when they come together, the economic powers brush together, they can really make a huge influence. So we've studied about all these parts or all these sections of the world and their respective economic and political powers. Now in this chapter we're going to study something that is very close to home. We're going to study contemporary South Asia. अब South Asia में क्या क्या आता है? So South Asia is kind of really a kind of term which is not really very clear to most people, because we understand South Asia means the southern part of Asia, but politically speaking इसमें countries क्या क्या आते हैं? So the first one is Bangladesh. Bangladesh, as we know, is very close to India. Then there's Bhutan, there's India and Nepal, there's Sri Lanka, there's Maldives, and then there's Pakistan. So these are the countries that come under the term, the expression South Asia. These you're going to have to remember, and later on in this chapter we're going to study the political regimes in each of these countries individually, how they used to be back when independence was coming along in these South Asian region, and what they have transformed into now. Or in some cases we'll be going much further back in history, and how their political regimes transformed over time. So anyway, so these are our South Asian countries that we're concerned about. Now sometimes Afghanistan is also involved in this discussion, and China, as we know, is a huge economy. It's a huge economic power, and in the Asian region it has a lot of influence, it has a lot of dominance, but nevertheless it doesn't fall under the South Asian countries category. So we're going to exclude that from our discussions. That part we're going to be talking, focusing on these countries precisely. Now, what happened was when India and Pakistan carried out their nuclear tests, and that was basically an information to the world that now we have nuclear power too. Because what happened was, during the Cold War, the US and the USSR and a couple of European countries like France and Britain. So these countries were kind of testing with their nuclear weapons, which kind of led to the expression war of deterration, which meant that since all parties concerned have their own nuclear weapons, you cannot really wage a nuclear war on anybody, because when that person counters your attack with another attack, it's going to lead to a devastation of the world, right? So now these countries that had their own nuclear weapons, these countries were basically at they were they had a huge advantage. They were at an advantage because they knew that that they will not be easily targeted by other countries, because now the rest of the countries will be scared of them because they had nuclear power. So it was a huge thing. It was a huge news for the world community that India now had its own nuclear weapon, and then Pakistan followed. Pakistan followed suit, and it had its own nuclear testing. So now India and Pakistan have joined the nuclear club. They have their own nuclear weapons too. So now they also become important countries. They also become highly important countries that you cannot really think about waging wars against. Not that people are, inclined at wars, but then the period was such. There was the Second World War, which was directly followed by the Cold War, which was a silent, passive war. But nevertheless, there was a very heated situation in all over the world at that point of time. So when India and Pakistan had its own nuclear testing, so this brought the focus, this brought the world's attention towards these countries and consecutively towards the South Asian region. So now this region became a very important region. Now there are two countries in the South Asian region among all these countries which have their own nuclear weapons, right? So even in their own region, they become really important superpowers. So now a country is never at peace with all countries of the world, right? It has to have some sort of conflicts and issues and disputes with some other countries. They may be trade disputes, they may be border sharing disputes of whatever nature. So in the South Asian region as well, there were several kinds of border and water sharing disputes. There were internal disturbances within countries, and then there were external disturbances which were across countries. So these things got highlighted. These things got highlighted because two countries were now they had transformed into countries with nuclear power, and this brought the attention of the world community to the South Asian region, and now their internal and external disputes were very much in focus, right? So these are the things that we're going to be looking at when we study the South Asian region, and it is said that this region has a lot of diversity, which is kind of really it goes without saying. It's kind of really obvious that each of these countries used to have their okay, so democracy is the most accepted political regime all over the world, at least in the present day. But previously, democracy was not so popular. When before the British colonized most of the world, democracy was not that popular. There was mostly aristocracy, and there was monarchy, and there was sultanates over the world, and there used to be rulers. There used to be a single ruler which controlled the governance of the entire state or the entire empire or the entire region, right? So in this chapter, we're going to be looking at how different countries in the area had different political systems before and how they all gradually transformed into democracy, and why democracy is so much important and so much accepted in the South Asian region. So But that apart, the political systems apart, these countries also had linguistic, social and cultural diversity, right? So it's quite obvious actually, because even when we see inside inside our own country, there's so much of linguistic diversity, because we have all states of our country divided on the basis of linguistic lines. There's cultural diversity. The culture that you find probably in the northern part of the country is widely different from the culture that you find in the eastern or even in the southern part of the country. And there's social differences as well throughout the entire subcontinent. There's a distinctiveness of society, right? So this South Asian region was a diversity in one geopolitical space. It constitutes one geopolitical space. It exists, all these countries exist within the same subcontinent, but they nevertheless have, very different social and cultural forms, very different languages. So it's not like it's in one area, so it's kind of going to have the same kind of society, the same language will be spoken, like we see in the American subcontinent. Like, so people speak English, people mostly speak English in the entire area, but that's not what happens in the South Asian region, right? So people have every country has its own culture, its own language, or several languages for that matter. So there's a lot of diversity, but then all these countries exist, peacefully somehow in the same geopolitical space. So let's look at, in a brief way, let's look at the countries that we're going to be studying in detail later on. The first is India and Sri Lanka, which they are written together because they both have had successful democracies since independence. So we know that when the Britishers left India, we were very much inclined and we were very much focused on turning India into a democratic country where power would be in the hands of people. Now there were no two opinions in this, right? So हमने डिसाइड किया था कि डेमोक्रेसी होगा, तो अब इसमें किसी ने कोई विरोध नहीं किया था, किसी ने ये नहीं कहा था कि नहीं डेमोक्रेसी नहीं होना चाहिए, कुछ और होना चाहिए. अब हमने ब्रिटिशर्स को भगा दिया है हमारे देश से, अब हम इंडिपेंडेंट है, तो अब इंडियन रूलर्स के हाथों में वापस पावर आ जानी चाहिए. नहीं, हम चाहते थे कि अब लोगों के हाथ में पावर हो, अब लोगों को ये डिसाइड करने का मौका मिले कि कौन उन्हें रूल करेगा, कौन उन्हें रिप्रेजेंट करेगा और कौन नहीं करेगा. So democracy has been very successful in India, and it's the same case when it comes to Sri Lanka. So these two countries both have had successful democracy since their own respective independences. The second is Pakistan and Bangladesh. Pakistan got independence, or Pakistan and Bangladesh, which was erstwhile Pakistan. These two countries both got independence in the same date as India, right? And they were meant to be democracies too. But each of these countries have faced, military rulers. There were coups in their democratic governments, and the military rulers used to seize power into their own hands. So these two countries have had both civilian and military rulers. They have had democracies as well as military rule. So there used to be a transition from, so there would be a democracy, then the militaries would seize power into their hands, and then again there would be protests and there would be restoration of democracy. तो ये ऐसे चलता था. पाकिस्तान और बांग्लादेश की पॉलिटिकल सिचुएशन में काफी टर्मोइल रही है. It hasn't really been peaceful in these countries. Moving on, there's Nepal, which used to be a constitutional monarchy, and now it's a democracy. Then there's Bhutan, which also used to be a monarchy, and now it's a multi-party government. And then there's the Maldives. the last country, the Maldives, which used to be a sultanate beforehand, and now it has transformed to republic, which is just another way of saying that it's very much of a people's government. It's a democratic people's government. So these are the countries that we have in the South Asian region, hoping that we're not missing out any of those written. So हम इनके बारे में डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे. हम देखेंगे कि जब इन कंट्रीज के पास अपना खुद का पावर आया डिसाइड करने के लिए कि हम कौन सा political system follow करेंगे, because it's one thing being colonized by an external country and then being subjected to their rule. That's when that's not a political system. That's when you're colonized. You don't have the power to decide. But then when you do have the power to decide, when you're independent and it's your own independent decision about what kind of a political system you want, that's when you make a choice between giving power to the people or keeping the power in your own hands. So, and it also largely includes the views of the people, what the people want, what their political aspirations are, what kind of rulers they want, and what kind of people they want to represent them. तो जब इन कंट्रीज के पास अपना इंडिविजुअल चॉइस था या तब इन्होंने एग्जैक्टली कैसा पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम चूज करा और कैसे पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम को इन कंट्रीज के लोग फेवर करते थे और कैसे if you're being subjected by a ruler, if you're being subjected to a ruler and if the ruler controls the entire region, how people protested and took the power from the hands of the ruler and strive towards establishing democracy in the region, towards establishing a people's form of governance in the region. So this is what we're going to be studying in detail in the entire chapter.